Hey Internet, I'm Chaz.
And I'm Dan. Welcome to Wine is Serious Business, episode 207. We're out at Brooks Estate today with Don and Heather. This is a show we've been looking forward to for over 3 years. So excited to be here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, Don? Go ahead first. Like, what got you into wine?
Well, I was first, yes. I'm Don Byard, and I was raised in Michigan. And as you know, that there's not much going on in Michigan as far as wine is concerned. There is now, but back in the days when I lived there, which was before 1970, we didn't know anything about wine. And until I went in the service and went to Germany, that's where I really learned about wine. We would go down to the Rhine River and to Riesling festivals. And the people had so much fun, and the wine tasted so good, I just thought, boy, I'm missing something in life. So when I got back into civilian life, I started making wine in the area where I lived in Michigan, Ann Arbor area, making wine started with apple, and then progressed to Michigan grapes, which are all American grapes. Mm-hmm. Catawba, Niagara, Delaware, all of those American grapes are grown along Lake Michigan. So I'd meet the tank truck that came to Detroit at the freeway, and I would fill all my containers with the juice, and then I would make the wine. So when wife and I finished my master's thesis, we decided we wanted to live where we're going to retire. So we decided that we would tour the U.S., looking for the best place to retire, because all my relatives moved to Florida, and we knew we didn't want to move there. So we toured the U.S., and when we got to the Northwest, we decided this was utopia. So
I feel that way too.
We moved to the Northwest in 1969. Well, when I got here, I looked around for grapes to make wine with, and there weren't any grapes. There were no grapes. The farmers didn't have them in their fields. And I finally resorted to buying grapes from a Portland fruit distributor, Gatto & Son, and they brought in Zinfandel from Cucamonga, California, by rail. So I would pick up my grapes with the other Italians, not that I'm Italian, but that's all there were making wine in Portland at that time, and made Zinfandel for a couple of years, until one day I worked for the Port of Portland, and there was a young fellow worked for us that told me he had to leave early that one day. He was a consultant and had to leave early because he had to go out to his farm. And I asked him, well, Bill, what are you doing with the farm? He says, well, these guys came up from Davis, and they're graduates of Davis, and they think they can ripen wine grapes in Oregon. And my heart started to beat.
Awesome.
That Bill was Bill Blosser, who was working for CH2M at the time. So I was out to his house with my wife Carolyn that weekend, and I talked her into buying 20 acres like Bill did, just so I could grow homemade wine. And so we did that. Searched for a year and a half looking for the right piece, and by that time I knew I was going to be in the Salem area with my career, and so we looked for something in the Eola Hills.
Cool.
Towards
Very
Salem.
Cool.
So in 1973, we purchased this property we're on today, 20 acres. I felt like it was a very good site.
And we're tasting, tasting outside. Hopefully you enjoy the view. The bees are going to enjoy the wine a little bit, I think. But and we got some of those old wines today. So this is part of the fun of having this show, is that we've got some older wine from the original estate, Hidden Springs label, and we've got some brand new wine from Brooks Estate. The first wine we're tasting today is the 1991 White Riesling Reserve.
Wow. Back then we made 3 Rieslings. We started out making dry Riesling, which was my first love. And back then it was very hard to sell dry Riesling. So we eventually started to make 3 Rieslings. One was dry to go with food. Then we made a reserve Riesling, which was to go with friends. And then a dessert Riesling for, obviously, dessert. So we have 2 of those today. One is the reserve, which is about 3% residual. And when you taste the Brooks Riesling, which are from the same vineyard, same
Cool stuff.
same place.
That's amazing.
It's 20 years younger, and it is a little bit drier than this. This is about 3% residual.
And how old were the vines in '91? Or when
Well,
did the first
I
Riesling
started
vines
planting in '73, so they're probably an average of 1975 would be the original
pretty great
planting date.
Man, and so still, right, good mature established vines, right, even in this 91. Some nice aromatics showing already out of the glass. Even as I was pouring it, you could kind of get them coming up, kind of like some light baked apple, a little bit of
Little honeyed.
like little honey, little white flowers. I think. What do you think, Heather? You grew up around these wines, right? So
I think I planted that vine.
wow, yeah.
I was 3, but I think it tastes great for a 91.
Yeah, no,
I mean-
absolutely. Oregon stuff seems to age really well. I've been lucky enough to have a few of the older wines from Elk Cove as well, and yeah, they're just they hold together so well, like really impressive.
Yeah.
And this is a good example of that.
Yeah, the color's good.
I like the sugar on it. Yeah, the flavors
It
here.
has a lot more viscosity.
It does,
than
yeah.
the Brooks does, but that will change a little bit as it ages.
Yeah, I think when the Brooks is this old, it's going to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Dramatically
I
different.
love that Brooks Estate Riesling.
It's brand new.
It's
That's
brand
the worst.
new, and it's I think one of their better Rieslings.
I'm excited to try it too because
Yeah.
it's and it is nice because you do have some historic vineyards, right?
Yep.
So it's really great to
Yep.
put that together, and they're biodynamic too, right? So it's you get to preserve that when you keep the single vineyard, single vineyard source.
There's an obvious sense of age on this, but there's also really fresh fruit here too, and the acidity is still very much intact.
Totally there.
Drinking very well, right? For a 91.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Really
it kind of
quite
reminds me of like delicious applesauce, right? Like it's a little baked down, a little bit of spice.
Yeah. What's 22 years old, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky it's still around.
Do you remember if it was a cool vintage or a warm vintage?
Yeah, do you remember 91? Drinking too much Riesling.
Well, what
I
were
can
they
hardly
like?
remember last year.
What were they like when they were young? Like right when you on release, like when you decided to sell the bottles, were they pretty tart and tight, or were they really friendly and approachable right away?
This reserve with just a touch of sugar to match that acidity was very fruity, very very nice and rounded, and just jumped out of the glass at you. It was well received. Now the dry Riesling was a little more reserved, and not quite as fruity in the onset, but as it aged a little bit, it became more palatable with food.
Cool. And I was wondering, so right, a lot of the pioneers here, you hear the story about Pinot Noir all the time, but some of these white grapes went in a lot of the early vineyards, and I'd like to hear a little more as I we'll start pouring the rinse of the new Estate Riesling, but hear a little bit more about why you thought it was worth your time to plant Riesling. Like obviously you were fond of the grape, but why Riesling? Why here?
And also,
Well,
what kept you from, a lot of people grafted over or switched out of Riesling? What made you stick with Riesling?
Well, when we planted grapes, we did not know what variety was going to be our flagship. So we planted 1/3 Riesling, 1/3 Pinot Noir, and 1/3 Chardonnay, which seemed to be the best mix, because the two wines from Burgundy, which we felt we were real close in the climate, and we knew we were better than Germany. Our climate was better in Germany.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was what most of us did. And once we found out that Pinot Noir was our flagship, a lot of folks, a lot of the vineyards grafted their Riesling over to Pinot Noir. which is easy to do. You just keep the same rootstock and you graft on a new variety, and you've got it.
Wow.
But based on my experience in Germany and my love for Riesling, I decided I wasn't going to do that. I was going to keep Riesling, and because I love the wine, and this is something you do for yourself. You know, when you make wine, you want to make the wine that you like. And I found that the Chardonnays that I made, I didn't like that well. Basically because we probably had the wrong clone when we started. It came out of California, was designed for California, and it wasn't an early ripener, and they weren't that good, I didn't think. So when Pinot Gris became an option, that's what I grafted over, was the Chardonnay. So now we have Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Riesling. That's our three main grapes that we grow here.
That's the mix today.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Nice.
Had we known Pinot Gris was going to be as good as it is, we would have planted that originally.
Yeah, you guys do get some nice fruit from that, and like interesting blends. And does the Estate Pinot Gris get blended this year? Or do you know?
It's probably going to be all on its own.
All on its own? Cool.
We'll probably be on our third vintage of it.
All right. For those of you who don't know, Heather works in the tasting room, manages like all the hospitality in the club. But like if you call or make connection with Brooks, like there's a really good chance you'll be talking to her.
Yeah.
So you know the whole lineup, and you know the current wines.
Yes.
About as well as anybody, right?
Yeah.
Like they're really in touch. So can you tell us a little bit about any more about the estate? Like this is the first year you've bottled the Estate Riesling by itself, right?
Yes.
Since when? I guess when was the last estate bottling? When was the last vintage?
Well, we do a sweet pea Riesling, which is 100%
that's
estate,
true.
and then the
Tethys is the sweet
100%
ones, yeah.
estate. But Chris wanted to kind of do, the Riesling scale on the back. We've done the really dry, and we've done the sweeters and the sweet pea. And he kind of wanted to do something a little in between. And
Cool.
so Chris was excited about doing it, and Janie, and it's got great reviews. So I think we'll continue to do it.
And flavor-wise, it's my kind of ideal point too. Like I like a little bit of sweetness. I think it brings out a lot of what Riesling has to offer. But you don't need a lot.
Yeah.
You don't need
Right.
a lot.
Just a touch. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we have 7 Rieslings total.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That's cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's incredible.
And you guys do it well, right? So
Chris
yeah.
does a great job. He's
Brooks is keeping up the Riesling tradition here in this side of the world.
Pretty proud of that. Yeah, I would be. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's very nice that Heather's involved with the Brooks Winery, because it still maintains my ability to have a foot in the door, so to speak, and be involved in the industry, which I've loved so much.
That's great. It kind of keeps the family feel that a lot of the Oregon wineries have, right? Like those connections are really important, I think.
Yep.
See, also fantastic. This is beautiful.
Also really aromatic, like a little more citrus on the nose, I think. A little bit of honeycomb.
Citrus. Yeah.
Still a lot going on.
Yeah, a little more citrus fruit. Still really nice, like sort of Honeycrisp, little sour apple thing going on.
This is almost like 2%, Heather?
Yes.
Wow.
2% residual sweetness as opposed to the Hidden Springs, which was 3%, a little bit more sweetness.
Definitely tart. I think a lot of Brooks wines deliver kind of that racy acidity. And the texture on it like suits me so well. Like I'm really fond of that. It kind of makes the mouth water.
Yeah.
Edging over to the tart side, but it's good contrast with the fruit, and I really want to compliment the depth of flavor on here. Like the apples are just very complicated and kind of capture the mind as well as the palate, and I really enjoy that.
I think we did 75 cases on.
Tiny.
Yeah, tiny.
Make your move now. Make your move now.
Yeah.
There's only 75 cases of that? Oh, well, I need 2 or 3 myself.
And the sugar and the acidity here are combined really well with the flavors. The integration is wonderful currently, but there's great balance here. This is probably aged fantastic based on trying the Hidden Springs and then this side by side. Awesome.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
And we do use the better corks in all the Rieslings because they're meant to age. So and I think 22 price point on.
Wow, that's great.
Killing it. Yeah.
That's great.
Great price.
So we need to put one of these away for taste it 20 years from now.
Right?
That's
Yeah,
well,
totally.
a few, yeah,
Yeah.
not just one. Yeah.
So have both of you like noticed a change in like the flavor profile as the vines have matured over the decades? Like, have you been able to taste that, or is it more like vintage variation that seems to dominate the experience?
I'd say vintage variation
Okay.
Yeah.
is a dominant feature.
The older vines definitely mature a little later. Bud break always happens on the younger
Really?
vines
Okay.
before it does on the older vines, and the older vines they pick those last. But
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
This year with the rains, the younger vines tended to get more bunch rot in them,
Sure.
and because of the rains that we had at the end of September. Whereas the older vines, Pomard, for instance, it ripens a little bit later, but yet at time of harvest there was very little bunch rot in the old vines because of the deeper roots. I think it takes longer for that moisture to get down to the deeper roots and then come back up into the grape and infuse the grape with more water.
Right.
And so the bricks, the sugar content was way up, and there was little bunch rot in the older vines.
Cool. So some nice sweet wines out of 2013, hopefully.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Speaking of Pinot Noir, I think we're going to move to that next. We're going to save the sweet wines for later.
All right.
So we'll go back to another Hidden Springs label wine. This is from 1985. Man, like perfectly cellared, right? Like straight from release into the cellar, coming out today. Thanks again for bringing out these old treasures, right? Like there's not a lot of wine from Oregon's history from these areas still around, and so it's really great to get a chance to try it. If you're watching this show, keep your eye open for it. While rare, this stuff does show up on auction sites every once in a while, like old Oregon wine, and and since who knows how some of them have been cellared when you get auction sites, like depending on where they're from, it's a bit of a gamble, but they're cheap, right? Since they weren't big famous brands,
Right. Generally,
you can find old stuff that I've gotten stuff from the 80s, 70s and 80s for like $20.
Wow.
And at those prices, even if you get a couple duds, when you get the one that's worth it,
Yep. Makes the whole
that's
thing
good.
worth it.
It's fantastic educational experience. So
All right. So which vintage are we on here? Say 85.
85. Yeah.
Nice.
So what? Yeah, I guess let's take this opportunity a little bit too to talk about your connection with Brooks, right? When did the transition from Hidden Springs to Brooks happen?
Well, it really started when Jimi Brooks came to me because he had heard that I had old vine Riesling, and this was a few years ago, and his love is for Riesling also. So he came to me and said he wanted to buy my Riesling because he loved to make dry Riesling, and that was music to my ears because I also am fond of dry Riesling. And so we worked a deal, a handshake deal. He would purchase my Riesling. And he was working for another winery at the time, and he made the wine on his own label called Brooks Wines. So we proceeded for 2 or 3 years doing that, and then he wanted the Pinot Noir. So I liked him a lot. He was really a nice kid. We had a lot of time out here, and he loved the vineyard. He wanted to buy the vineyard, and we talked about it. And I said, I want to sell to you someday when we're ready and you're ready. We can do that, make that happen. Well, as you know, Jimmy passed away in '04 at age 38 with a heart aneurysm, and it was a shock to the whole industry. It was amazing. They held the memorial service here at this vineyard, and 300 people showed up to attend the ceremony, and it was really a teary event. And after the memorial service was over, at least 12, I'm not sure how many there were altogether, but 12 Oregon winemakers, Jimmy's competition and friends, came to Janie, his sister, who came up from California for the service, not knowing much about what Jimmy had done up here in Oregon. She had her own life in California and knew a little bit about it, but not a lot. But at the memorial service, these friends of Jimmy's, winemakers, came to her and offered her the opportunity to save the winery that he had started for his son Pascal. And boy, that was a monumental decision on her part to say, yes, I would like to save it for Pascal, and I'll take it on and manage it. Wow. And she's done that and done a very good job. And first year I had grapes, these grapes that had no winery to go to. But when Janie accepted that offer, I took grapes every place to these different wineries, and they all made the wine and brought it back to Janie. And
they all volunteered their time and space that year to do it.
yeah.
That's an amazing.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful
That's
Oregon,
what I love about Oregon.
Yeah.
Oregon event.
The whole industry just pulls together, and
So we've had a good relationship since, and it's continued, and Janie has followed through with Jimmy's dream of buying my vineyard, and so Janie has purchased the vineyard, and so that this is now their estate vineyard.
It's a great story, man. It's fantastic. And if you get the chance to come out and visit Brooks today, like, the staff is all really familiar with the story, and it's amazing how well they've stuck true to his dreams and ambitions. And he started Jimmy started the biodynamic farming, and they've really carried that on. So it's this great sense of continuity, this great sense of history that a few of the the older Oregon wineries have, and it's a great chance to engage with that.
Yeah, Jimmy's, after the handshake and purchased my Riesling, he says, oh, by the way, I want to farm it biodynamically. And I said, oh, sure. What's that mean to me? He says, well, we can't use any herbicide or any chemicals that you might be using. And I said, oh, that meant no Roundup. And that meant I had to find another way to manage the weeds in between the grapes, and that was my biggest worry, to figure that out.
so since 2002, it's been farmed biodynamically, or
Yeah.
is that
Okay.
when he started?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Riesling was, and I thought, we might as well do the whole vineyard if we're going to do that to the Riesling also. So we started that practice. Once I figured out the way to get rid of the weeds inexpensively, I figured out what's called a bezariti. It's a thing you mount on a 3-point, and it's $500 to put together to scour the ground under the grapes. And the other alternative was a German machine that cost $8,000.
Whoa.
And I didn't have that readily available at that time.
Yeah.
There were, when we started planting grapes, there were only 9 wineries in Oregon. That was 1973, and half of those were fruit wineries like Oak Knoll and Honeywood. And so there wasn't a lot of infrastructure around for us to get the industry going. That we learned how to do malolactic tests in the winery. Well, nowadays you just take a sample down to the local wine supply store, and they do all those tests for you. Everything is there.
Wow.
We had to bottle our own wines. We made a 3-spout filler that we were able to sterilize, and Heather knows a lot about that because she spent some time on the bottler and brought out a lot of friends from high school to help bottle. Nowadays, the truck pulls up, the bottling truck pulls up, and you hook your tank up to it, and you're done.
Good to go. So these were all hand bottled, right?
All
This
hand
85.
bottled,
Yep.
hand corked, and
Yep.
hand foiled.
One by one.
A lot of work, a lot of love. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another one where the nose and both the palate show obvious signs of age.
Yep.
The nose definitely seems a little older, but when you taste it, there's still vibrant fruit there. There's still some good acidity. But the sense of age, a little bit of oxidation is definitely showing. But
Yep.
delicious together, like fun to drink.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Really good stuff. So I definitely agree with what he's saying. Like the age is apparent on the nose, but the fruit's still really there. Got a little bit of tart character. It reminds me of kind of like a good cherry pie. You can taste that the fruit's kind of baked down a little bit of nutmeg, maybe a touch of clove in there. But it's still really clean. It's got this nice, delicate touch to it. It's really enjoyable, and you know, I don't think many people would have guessed that in 1985, right, you'd be drinking this over 20 years down the road, and it'd be really enjoyable, right? Like you could drink glass after glass
Almost
of this
30
and really.
years.
Almost,
Yeah,
it's
almost.
20, it's 28 years.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I
So,
wouldn't
You guys
advise.
weren't even born, right?
no, we were.
No, yeah, you were. Yeah. 6 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise keeping it this long, but I felt like it was something I need to preserve in the library
Yeah.
wines.
And especially if you can go straight from the bottling line to the cellar, right? Like
Yes. Yes.
that's a good way to do it.
Boy, that's really, really tasty stuff. What's the alcohol levels on this? Were you guys using all neutral oak barrels back then? How were you fermenting the wines back then?
We were fermenting in smaller 4x4 totes,
Okay.
smaller than what we use now, but yet the heat would build up about 90 degrees in the fermentation.
Okay.
Sure.
And we fermented them a lot faster than they do now. We did not do any cold soaking that's currently done, hold back fermentation and let the juice sit with the skins longer.
Right.
We were much faster in the fermentation.
And definitely a little lighter color, right? Like you can see the age showing, but
Yeah.
it's
A little pruny.
color on the wine, and
Yep.
Age in oak though, or
Aged
no?
in oak, yeah.
Yeah.
French oak. Medium toast.
Okay.
Medium.
and brand new barrels at the time.
Brand new. Yeah.
Wow.
Did they still cost
They were
$1,000?
well, no, they were
This does not come off
500.
evident. I mean,
They
there's-
were 500 then. So that was a lot. That was a lot of money for a winery to buy a new barrel.
Because I could taste. I wanted to say I could taste a little bit of toast on the finish, but yeah, for all new oak, amazing, right? In the way that it's not there at all.
Right.
So yeah. So should we move on to the next wine?
Yeah, let's move on
All
to the
right.
next